Good morning, Gamecock fans. JC Shurburtt here with coffee. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Today is Monday, March 17th, the year of our Lord 2025. It's great to be with you this fine morning. St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, it's Monday, but I think around South Carolina, especially Columbia, the day is Saturday. Saw a lot of good pictures on social media of the St. Patrick's Day celebration in Five Points in Columbia. Brought back a lot of memories. Certainly, wish all of you the luck of the Irish, and hope you had a wonderful time this past weekend. One day I will return to that fine event. I always enjoy it, even as an adult. Enjoyed it more in college, to be honest, but that was a great day in college, as we all know. Lots to talk about here on Coffee this morning: football, baseball, basketball. Going to start with basketball. South Carolina turns down an NIT invitation. So what changed? Because it wasn't just me saying it. It was widely reported that the Gamecocks would accept it if offered, and then boom, they didn't. So I was trying to rack my brain, and you can't get a straight answer about it. The statement from Lamont Paris. South Carolina did have some injuries this year. My question would be, well, did somebody suffer a serious injury in the SEC tournament? We just don't know about it. Um, he mentioned attrition on the roster because of injuries, and that did make a lot of sense to me. Or maybe he's talking about some guys being too hurt to play, I guess, or didn't want to risk it. I don't know. But the attrition plus injury thing didn't make a lot of sense to me. Sometimes those statements don't. And I'm not going to call anybody a liar because it's just not, these days. People put out statements and they give their reasons and that's their answer, and they're not lying. That doesn't necessarily always mean that there aren't secondary concerns as well. And so I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, what changed? Did anything change besides maybe some injuries that popped up? And I realized that last week, I believe this was last week. Um, I think it was after Carolina, after the NIT talk bubbled up, and it was maybe something that kind of flew under the radar because it's so football driven when you talk about revenue share and transfer portal and all that other sports don't pop completely up on the radar when it's discussed. It has here at Carolina because the revenue share slash NIL situation has to get better. And I did have a good conversation with someone over the weekend that told me it most assuredly is, and that there's a lot of alignment. Keep that word in your file because we're going to be talking about that later this week within the university on that subject. But anyway, so what happened? Well, this whole House lawsuit, right? That states revenue share, there's caps, and you have to get NIL deals approved and all that. And I've explained that that's caused kind of a Wild West scenario for the short term because NIL collectives are front loading deals. In other words, paying these guys out before the fiscal year starts July 1st because they can't spend booster money on NIL deals after that. And most collectives are largely booster funded. You make a certain base with, I mean, Ole Miss actually, it's just their fans joining for about $10 a month on average. They have a bunch of members. Some collectives don't. South Carolina's kind of a nice blend, but and then there's other NIL dollars that are paid out by other entities and things like that. And so come July 1st, that pot of money is got to be spent or lost. Basically, as far as the big dollar deals go, they can facilitate smaller dollar deals and all that. And this is, of course, I'm going to put the caveat in here. It's subject to litigation, like every freaking thing in college football these days. So who knows? But you got to operate. Everybody's got to operate on the basis of the settlement. right? As if it will get approved. And once it does get approved, and it's expected to, that's April 7th. You got most everybody's operating the same way because the penalties for cheating when this thing goes down are severe. And they have an enforcement arm they've agreed upon that has a lot more power than the NCAA. It's a federal lawsuit, so it's governed by, you know, a settled court case, which you could be held in contempt if you break it, all that good stuff. So it's a little more serious to get around this stuff for those that constantly worry about other schools cheating. You know, uh, I've said before. I mean, if this goes through, it's going to be a lot more fair, even really more fair than back in the old Bagman days. If it goes through, because people are going to sue. The Title IX people are going to sue. The people that think you should have unlimited NIL and you could pay a guy $1 million for a tweet are going to sue. I don't know if it'll hold up. You know how the courts are. So we'll see. All that aside, everybody's operating under those circumstances. And they're front loading deals because it's perfectly legal to pay those out before July 1st. Well, the turd in the punch bowl, so to speak, for that plan with basketball, and then it's going to affect the next football period too, the transfer portal period, is that after April 7th, when the suit is allegedly going to be settled, after April 7th, you can't do these deals between April 7th and July 1st. You can pay them out before July 1st. You can certainly pay them, but you have to have the deal in place. Anything signed after April 7th is going to be subject to the new policies. In other words, that money can't come front loaded. It's got to come out of rev share. It's got to be legit NIL and all that good stuff. So the transfer portal window for most schools, including South Carolina, to go and really get out there and spend has shrunk by 2 weeks, basically, because you have to have them all signed, right, and sealed and delivered in order to front load those deals. And with South Carolina, my understanding is, that's kind of there's like a bridge period, just like for everybody else, but that bridge period now, as far as getting the deals done, has shrunk. So the NIT, I almost think they were probably, thought they had a pretty good chance of advancing through it. You start winning, you got to go to Indianapolis and on the road and everywhere else. You got games to coach. And time is of the essence because you're not dealing with a month-long portal period anymore. You're dealing with 2-3 weeks. So that's, April 7th is not that far away from now, right? I think oh my gosh, Alexa pops on and tells me it's like however many days. Nevertheless, so that's something to consider as well. I think the portal opens March 24th. So, and runs through the end of April, but man, if you're going to go out there and contend, and so I get it. So that may have been part of the secondary reasoning for this. I don't have a big opinion about it either way. I was happy to see them play again. They've had just such bad, I don't want to say luck because they did it to themselves in a lot of instances. Such a hard time getting over the hump in close games. Colin Murray Boyles, maybe a lottery pick. We may have seen him play his last game, and he went out like a warrior. But at the same time, I see the logic behind it. And in Lamont Paris's statement, he talked about going to the NCAA tournament next year. So that's perfectly plausible, even though this season was bad, especially record wise. You get a new team in here that can run his system that works, and you got players you can match up. There's no reason why you can't get back, especially, the SEC put 14 teams in the NCAA tournament. Which, by the way, if I feel bad for one team, it's West Virginia. They got screwed. North Carolina basically got in if you're looking at metrics because of things like efficiency and strength of schedule and things like that. So, and I get strength of schedule all day long, but they were 1-12 against quad one teams. So I didn't see that when you're talking about those teams head to head. But yeah, they put Texas on in, and Lenardi was wrong. He was talking about how they wouldn't get in. And so I think he wanted one of those Mountain West teams to get in or whatever, thought they would, but very interesting on that end. But South Carolina turns down the NIT. So now it goes to how do you rebuild the roster? How do you get players in here? And that's going to be the focus. I do think that it is up for discussion as far as Colin Murray Boyles coming back. I don't think he's a lock to leave. In fact, I know he's not. But there is a large amount of NBA scouting people that think he's going to be drafted pretty high. So if it's top 20, I think he'll probably go. If it's anything below that, it's going to be a decision to make. But it's also told there are resources in place to kind of take care of him and stuff. You guys, I'm not going to share the number because I don't get into numbers, but he wasn't getting paid like some of these guys this year. But he's worth every penny to bring him back. If you bring him back and put good players around him, and you can have a couple guys on the roster that return that get better, you can have a really good team. I mean, it's not out of the question at all to turn this around pretty quick. And then again, I say it all the time. The key with South Carolina basketball, folks, just about everybody that's been through here, with the exception of Steve Newton, has had one good season. George Felton went back to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 15 years in '89. I thought he got fired, kind of got a raw deal getting fired. We kind of turned our back on one of our own in that situation when he was going through some personal problems. He was a hell of a coach. And then South Carolina was going into the SEC at the time, and he gets fired, and he could recruit, man. You talk about local talent. Boy, he could get it done. And he played at Carolina. He was an alum. They hired a disaster in Steve Newton, which that was par for the course at the time. Mike McGee comes in. Bobby Cremensley comes and goes. And then Eddie Fogler. He actually had back-to-back good years. Won the SEC, came right back, went 23-8. Third year, 8-21. Dave Odom had an NCAA tournament year, a couple of NIT titles. I think the tournament's what you got to do. And Dave Odom actually was 24 games over 500 here. That was pretty good. So was Frank, and he and Frank Martin have kind of set the standard. Darren Horn's first team was good, went to the NIT, won the SEC East. They were divisions in those days, so he got a trophy. Weak strength of schedule out of conference derailed them. That was Devin Downey and all those guys. He couldn't sustain it even with Downey the next year, losing record. He had some injuries too. Dominique Archie, I think, got hurt that year. Moving forward, we know what happened with Frank. Screw job 1 year, NIT, Final Four the next year, never went back. And then Lamont Paris, 26 wins last year, almost top 4 finish in the SEC, 13-5, best conference record ever since they've gone to the 18 game schedule. Nobody's gone 13-5. And then only Eddie Fogler in 97 won more SEC games. That's been a challenge too for this basketball program, is the SEC. When they got into the SEC was, and there were years where it was garbage. Carolina was just part of the garbage, and Carolina's never been able to figure it out. Frank Martin was the best at figuring it out. If you look at his conference records year to year, once they kind of cycled up, and I guess in that year, the screw job year, and then the Final Four year, they rarely had a losing conference record. It was at least 500, and he kind of figured it out, but never could get to the tournament. So I don't know. History of South Carolina basketball, I'll say it again, I went off on a tangent there. Yeah, it is rife with inconsistencies, bad decisions, especially coaching wise and other. And it lacks the passionate let me before I get in trouble here. South Carolina fans are passionate about basketball. They love men's basketball. They care about men's basketball. There is not the subset of the fan base though, like with women's basketball, there's a subset of the fan base. They love the other sports, but women's basketball is their thing, the fans, right? There's a whole army, although I don't know what they're doing with their seats at Founders Park, some of them, a whole army of baseball people that Carolina baseball hung the moon for them. And we know about football. Where is that in men's basketball? Men's basketball is sort of like the Aerosmith of Carolina sports. And hear me out. Aerosmith, people like their music. They're a good band. They're a legendary band, even. Do you know any Aerosmith fans? Like true Aerosmith, like Aerosmith is their number one band. No, they're everybody's second favorite band, our third favorite band. They sell that's good enough to sell out their concerts and be famous and have great music and they've written some great tunes through the years and everybody likes them. But I don't know a single Aerosmith fan. Like true, like that's my number one go-to. What's your favorite band? It's Aerosmith, dog. That's men's basketball at Carolina. Everybody loves them. Don't get me wrong. But where's that subset of the fan base that's hardcore? That has to be developed, frankly. That's something that's missing. And I'm not blaming fans. Don't get me wrong. The fan base will show up if you win and pack the arena. And God, they took 20,000 to the Final Four on a week's notice. I mean, that's not it. It's that there's not that subset. Like and outside of football, you have to have that in sports. You got to have that subset, and it can be built. I mean, I don't know that there are very many Auburn basketball fans, right? Just love basketball, that kind of thing. And when you want to be excellent, like Carolina does across the board in everything, then you're going to have that little bit of support. So I don't know if a tip-off club or a basketball only society, something like that would help, but you have to have interest in doing it. So, and look, I'm not, that was a tangent I went off on. That's like way down the list as far as what needs to happen to have a good team next year. And I'm talking long-term, big picture, and how to maybe get that consistency. That's one of the elements I think and keys to consistency. And when we talk about support, we very rarely, people are like, what the hell are you talking about with support? It's not, it's across the board support. It's not just one thing. People think you're talking about buying tickets or money or whatever. It's all of the above. So I wanted to kind of shed some detail on that. So anyway, there's your men's basketball talk. With the women, I'll just say this. I'm thoroughly unimpressed with the women's selection committee. I mean, with the men, every year there's an argument about a bubble team. And yes, West Virginia got screwed, in my opinion. But, and if their names were Kansas, I just don't see them leaving them out. Even an Oklahoma State or a Baylor, one of the teams in the Big 12. But, it's, and West Virginia's made a lot of NCAA tournaments through the years, but I thought that was a big screw job. Nevertheless, I just don't understand what these people are thinking. And it's not necessarily, it's not just South Carolina by far deserved the number one overall seed. And people say, well, UCLA beat them head to head. Yeah, but in basketball, that hadn't really mattered through the years, especially with an early season game. When was that? November? That hadn't been a big tiebreaker. I know the college football playoff committee's married to it, but South Carolina's metrics were better than everybody. I just don't. I mean, look, it's a first world problem when you're complaining about if you're the number one overall seed or not. But Dawn Staley has a good point. Why should South Carolina, the best program in the country, go out and schedule all comers, give everybody a shot, and play a gauntlet non-conference, and then a very much so improving Southeastern Conference? SEC used to be the premier women's conference, but it hadn't, it kind of dipped. Carolina sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the room, but now, you got Mulkey at LSU, you got Texas in the league, Oklahoma in the league. It's starting to be a gauntlet in and of itself, like every other sport. So I agree with her point on that. What's worse though is these people there's no forward thinking in the room apparently, because You have Texas and Carolina on one side of the bracket, and in women's basketball, the top seeds not usually advance. There's very little Cinderella. Maybe there'll come a day that there is, but there's very few Cinderellas. Okay, so in theory, Texas and Carolina could meet for a fourth time in the semis, and Southern California and UCLA could meet for a fourth time in the semis. I mean, that damage to me that damages your product. You know, when you have yet another matchup like this or another matchup like that. I'm not saying television and product and all that should drive it, but they do. The women's tournament does things like this is why everybody's crammed in one regional. This is why, because they try to get more crowds and eyeballs and stuff. So, and I think you could argue all day about, you know, who was the fourth between Southern California and Texas, who was the fourth number one seed. Um, and yeah, I just don't know. I was just unimpressed with what they did. I feel like South Carolina has a lot of haters out there in this sport. It's unfair, and it is probably, a lot of people think, well, they're picking on poor old South Carolina. It's probably just because they're really good. And they have all the McDonald's All-Americans. They're hoarding the players. So anyway, frustrating weekend on the baseball diamond all the way around. Saturday was excellent. 11 Carolina loses 8-5. Just got off to a bad start again. First inning, came back and couldn't quite get it done against the first Witherspoon. Saturday they hit the second with. I thought they hit the ball considering the level of pitching they were playing. I think they passed the test way more than they did against Clemson. Won that one 11-5, and they kind of just kept being relentless. The wind was blowing out, and then yesterday was ridiculous. I mean, they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, up 5-3. I mean, it just blew the ninth inning, and then that kid hits the home run. The wind literally just took it and blew it out. Was that? They must have said their prayers and gone to church at Oklahoma with the Oklahoma team while they were in Columbia, because that was nature. that was the Almighty blowing the wind out. But it's like Paul Maneri said, they got to take it like men and get ready for a tough Charleston team Tuesday. Then they got to go to Arkansas. It never fails. And on the show later this afternoon, we're going to talk about if you're sick of hearing in this league over and over in every sport with the SEC, or what that really means. Because I don't know, man. I get tired of hearing it. So we'll see what happens on coffee. All right, football. Pro timing day is tomorrow. It should be a historic pro timing day. 25 guys, a lot of future NFL players. I'm sure it'll be packed with scouts. That's good. And then spring practice opens on Wednesday. So with football, there's a ton of talk about, replacing players. And that's really what our focus has been, that in recruiting. And there's going to be a big recruiting decision later this week with Zion Giles from Carver's Bay, offensive tackle. So we'll keep tracking that. But, one thing Jamie Bradford pointed out and Matt Anderson on the morning show a couple of weeks ago was lines of scrimmage. Jamie said he's going to die on this hill, right? I'll die on this hill. That everybody talks about receivers and running backs and quarterbacks and defensive ends, or not ends because they're a line of scrimmage, but DBs, rightfully so. Right? Rightfully so. The guys that touch the ball the most are the guys that get focused on in this sport. And that's fine. It's that way. I mean, in fantasy football, you don't really pick defensive ends and offensive tackles and stuff. And fantasy football's drawn it's overwhelmingly positive for drawing people into the game and having them understand the sport a little bit and follow the stats and all that. It's negative because a lot of people adopt it, and the negativity is dwarfed by the positivity with fantasy football. But it's gotten people stat crazy about things and in their mind ranking players based on stats. And that drives me nuts, because in football it's way more of that. And then the guys that don't get any stats are the guys that are important, and that's the line of scrimmage. And what Matt Anderson pointed out with Jamie was that on the line of scrimmage, Dylan Stewart and Josiah Thompson are really good starting points. So, starting points. It's no secret South Carolina lost a lot. Hell, they lost a lot on offense, too. I mean, just numbers wise, no, but you're talking about your leading receiver, your leading rusher, and three your starters on the interior, including your center. That's a lot, you know, because Josh Allen was leading receiver, number one, the primary weapon, for Lenore Sellers last year. So who are the starting point players? And that's the good news. I mean, I looked at Oklahoma last year and I thought, well, they've got some receivers with potential and a guy that got injured and had a good year a couple of years ago. They got some portal guys, but they lost their whole O line. And then they're starting a redshirt freshman quarterback. And then their running back room does not look like some Oklahoma running back rooms. So it's pretty easy to say this team's probably going to struggle, right? Based on losses from the years before, all 5 linemen, all that good stuff. And I didn't see any, they kind of scrambled in the portal to get guys in, and it's hard. Although SMU did put together an entire O line from the portal and apparently are a playoff team. I don't know. Last time I checked, Ward Manuel said they were. So, I knew they were going to struggle. But, when you have building blocks, starting points, foundational players, veterans coming back, I'm not going to say it's easier because it's not easy. It's not easy what the football staff's trying to do. ... in this league, right? ... It's not easy to do this, but who are the starting point players? Like, who are the guys that have been here for a while that are going to be at least in the probably start? I mean, I would say these guys are safe bets to start if healthy. And there's several and on both sides of the ball. And I got four for you. Obviously on offense, it's Lenore Sellers. I mean, if you don't have a good quarterback, you're dead before you arrive. That was a big thing last year. Last offseason, everyone, Spencer Rattler's gone now, and they're just not going to be any good. They didn't know about Lenore Sellers. Those of us that knew about Lenore were like, we'll be all right, dog. And obviously, he's got to get better in a lot of areas to really, I guess, have the consistency and performance that I think are up to his standards and thus elevate the team. Although he's very good last year, though. I mean, I'm not complaining. It's not a very big jump. There's a lot that he needs to clean up, like little things here and there, but he'll be good. I mentioned Josiah Thompson, the returning starter at left tackle. I think having Big Tree come back is big too. He didn't start last year though, so we're going to kind of narrow this. And Josiah Thompson, freshman All SEC, freshman All American, 5-star prospect from Dillon. Does have to get better, but is a foundational piece. Mike Shula, if you're a member of the BigSpur.com, that gave a one-on-one interview to Hale McGranahan and mentioned that, hey, I'm glad that Josiah is back. And then he also mentioned tackles. He said, if you're going to lose players on the O-line, he said, and certainly we're, concerned, or not concerned, but we have to rebuild the interior. He's like, it's really good to have both tackles back. And so that other guy's Kaysen Henry. And I know there's a lot of different opinions about Kaysen and his performance, and some people want to move Tree to right tackle and see. And I can't rule out any switches like that completely, but I'd be very surprised. They think Kaysen Henry's really good, so we'll see kind of how that all plays out. But he is a guy you can pencil in at right tackle again if healthy. And then the fourth guy, I'm going to say Nick Harbor. And for the purposes of this list, because you may say, well, JC, I'm excited about this guy or that guy or Rasul Faison at running back or Michael Smith or Brady Hunt. I'm just going with returning starters. So this is a very narrow, when you're talking about foundational pieces, starting points, this is the starting point, right? Not the end result. Those are end result discussions. So I just want to be clear about that. Yeah, because sometimes I'll write, people freaked out the other day when I didn't project Xavion Hardy to be a starter. And I'm like, well, right now he's not, because he's a junior college defensive tackle and has to go through the offseason. He could be, But right now, if I'm being honest, I'm thinking it's probably going to be Goodwine and Brownlow Dindy at the end of the day. But that'll change. I mean, it's March, and I think this article was in February. So anyway, Nick Harbor, in Nick's, we've talked about him. Very interesting player. He's working very, very hard, but also legit has made progress. He's got, I think, after 26 catches, if he can get to 45 this year, for those that do love stats and play fantasy football, there you go. 45 over under on Nick Harbor catches for the season, 45 and a half. So that's a good four-man starting point foundation. You got to replace some other players and get right. I mean, and look, there's more returning start. I mean, Jared Brown started some, Vadravius Jacobs started some, Mazio Bennett started some at receiver. So they have more than 4 returning starters, but these are the foundational pieces. I could throw Mazio Bennett in there at receiver too. And I thought about that, but Nick had a little bit better finish than Mazio last year, so I threw him. And of course, he's a guy everybody wants to talk about. But you can make a case for Bennett as well, maybe even Jared Brown as far as that goes. Defense, which is where they really have to replace some dudes. And look, I love Fred Johnson, but Fred Johnson's not a returning starter. So you got Dylan Stewart, obviously. I think he's going to have a really big year. I think that he is a special player. He does things that I haven't seen a whole lot on a football field as far as bend and get off and tenacity and difficulty to block. Jelon Kilgore has been really good his first 2 years here. Looks like he may stay at nickel, and so they'll have to replace one of the safeties. But that's always subject to change. Also in the secondary, Judge Collier. We forget about Judge Collier sometimes, but he is a Rock Hill defensive back that started by his second year. He's very physical. And can cover, and he's got that good long length. And I'll say it again. There are plays where corners get beat in college. I mean, it doesn't mean they're not good. The good ones forget about that play and move on. Judge is good at that. Really good at run support too. And then DQ Smith, who kind of falls in that same category as Case and Henry, where people are they don't know they kind of. There's a certain segment of the fan base that would like to see him get beat out. It's not going to happen. They love this guy. And I'll say this, I would like to see him make more big plays this year, more plays and all that. He's capable of doing so. It's kind of quiet last year. And I don't know if that's maybe because everybody else was just playing lights out in the secondary or whatnot. But, they think he's a very good player. And so DQ Smith right there in Columbia, South Carolina, I think he'll be a 4th-year starter because he started as a freshman, sophomore, junior. Yes, 4th year of being a starter. Guys like that are guys you can build on. So that's kind of the key or the starting point. And the key will be to build upon these players. And, a lot of them are decorated recruits. Some of them were under the radar, like in-state guys like Collier and Smith. Thompson and Harbor certainly were decorated. We know Lenore Sellers, Dylan Stewart. So it's good when you look back at recruiting and seeing if you're successful at it, to see if your top recruit guys end up being legit. And then B, how many guys did you find in your state or otherwise that can play football as good as any of the higher rated guys? And there's a nice blend of that here. Okay, before we get out of here, it's March Madness. I want to encourage everyone, and this is important, do this for me, folks, because it doesn't cost you any money, right? Go to Ernie.com, register to use Ernie.com. Go to the front page. You got to make sure your ad blocker, if you're on the desktop or laptop, is not up. Put in South Carolina Gamecocks as your favorite team. And enter the bracket challenge, the All Gamecocks bracket challenge from ITG, thebigspur.com, sponsored by Ernie.com. First prize, if you got the best national bracket, is $5,000 cash. First prize within the Gamecock entries is $100 cash and a gift card and a hat, free memberships. So it's a local prize pack too. And then the Gamecocks overall as a fan base can win the Ernie Cup. That's a big trophy they give out for the most registrations and brackets and good brackets. And it's kind of a formula. And it's kind of like when you were in school. I've talked about the fundraiser. The best classroom gets a pizza party. Well, we get to have an Ernie Cup party where they bring the cup in and everybody gets invited out, and so we got a little celebrating to do if the Gamecocks do it. But go to Ernie.com and take care of that today. They're sponsoring the coffee and all that for the next few weeks. Also, don't forget about PalmettoGolfing.com, Palmetto Golf and Belts, Gamecock owned and operated. Check them out. Buy the coffee, Gamecock coffee, and all that good stuff. John Whittle, aftermath of baseball and other things. I'm sure they'll talk NIT and stuff coming up on the morning show. I believe Mike Morgan is in as well. This afternoon, Phil and I will roll through topics as always. That's from 12 to 2. Download the Chief Sports app. This is JC Shurburtt with coffee. Holla at you soon.